Welcome to our podcast about the great miracles of the Iron Swords War. And today we're going to talk about the second miracle, the miracle of the Lotar. Lotar is the Hebrew word for CT, counterterrorism. And, well, actually, in order to understand that miracle, we need to understand several things. The first thing is the Iranian plan. The Iranian plan was to take out the border defense, both in the south and in the north, the Galil Brigade and the Gaza Brigade, simultaneously in 3 hours. They used the logic of shock and awe. The idea was to go so fast, so rapidly inland, and then they can destroy the Israeli nation. But how can you accomplish such a thing and destroy a modern nation and to defeat a modern army by using only 20,000 people or so? Well, the answer is by using Admiral William McRaven's theory of special operations, the head of JSOC and SOCOM, the American elite special operations and special operation forces commands. And he was also very well known and famous because of he was the leader of the operation to capture Osama bin Laden back in 2011 in Afghanistan. But McRaven, as I said, was the creator of a theory. This theory speaks about a term McRaven calls relative superiority. The idea is, if you are using the surprise element in the right way, you can achieve superiority in a special place and time with a small group of people. If you attack simultaneously in several places, let's say in 60 or 70 places all through the Gaza borderline, you can achieve in every specific place there this relative superiority for a certain amount of time. So let's say if you're going by this method of special operations and you take out every specific base or outpost of the IDF all through the south border with Gaza, and every unit have to fight on its own life to survive against a relative superiority that was created by this attack from bigger forces of the Hamas. Then you can take the entire defense out and to put the second and the third wave inland and to actually conquer the entire south of Israel. The same thing will happen from the north. Then Israel could lose the south and the north in the same time. Now, come the most important part. You go inland, you go after the air bases, the strategic bases, the intelligence bases, etc. But also, you are trying to take out the equipment warehouses of the IDF. Why is this so important? Because the Israelis, the IDF, is actually separated to 3 different armies. So the first army is the routine army, the regular army. It's actually on the borders everywhere in the south, in the north, and it have to deal with the regular threats, the daily threats of terror acts, of people trying to get inside Israel from, I don't know, different reasons, etc. And it's good for that. But of course, nothing like what he needed to go against in October 7th. The third army is the big army of the reserve. And this one, the reserve army of Israel in Iron Swords War, was the largest ever. We're talking about more than 350,000 men. Hashem Aleim Yichyu. And that was a huge army. But the problem is most of it is actually the regular civilians living their daily life. Every civilian in Israel is a potential soldier, especially if you have had the training and he did it 3 years service in the regular army. So the problem is you need some time in order to reorganize, to equip, to train, and also to give the missions to the regular people, to call them from home and to make out of them the big third army. This plan was especially against that. It should have been faster, not in 36 hours, but in 3 hours, to capture us with the pants down, and in order to take out Israel without the opportunity to call those people. And then we needed to fight in the streets with some handguns, I don't know, with no equipment, with no tanks, etc. Now comes the second and the most secret army of Israel. It's so secret, actually, that even he doesn't know about himself. It's not a real army. It's thousands of people who are part of the CT units, and I'm talking about all the different type of variants of the counterterrorism unit, the elite units, the special forces, many names of different units, but an organization also, not only from the army, but other security organizations also in Israel, that will jump in moments from their houses. These guys are regular to be first responders, to be alarmed in moments, because they are very used to act of terrors. And this is happening every now and then randomly in random places in Israel. So we're talking about thousands of people, maybe 5,000 or so, that jumped in the morning of October 7 and ran to the south because they didn't know about what's going on. They didn't know a thing, but they thought this is an act of terror. So they just react in the natural way. They react to an act of terror, and they didn't know about themselves that they are actually an army. The army of the first responders, the second army. And I'm saying it's secret because it's actually a combination of people, but the Iranian planners didn't knew and thought about that when they planned the war. They thought we're going inland. The Israelis will not have the time to reorganize and call the big army, and then we can finish Israel in those crucial 3 hours. But that didn't happen because the second army actually was acting like a huge bondage and stop the bleeding, talking about like national bleeding that we had from the southwest border from Gaza. And actually this was a huge miracle, because if you're talking in terms of counterterrorism and you parallel this day of fighting, October 7, 223, to different acts of terror in modern time, like, for example, 9/11 or the act of terror in Mumbai, right? Then you see this thing was much more severe. Of course, in 9/11, there were more casualties, but it was not a war. It was just bombs, right? And then the rescuers needed to save lives like you do in an earthquake scene or something, with all the ruins and demolished buildings, etc. But here we're talking about the rescuers need to go inside the kibbutzim and all along the front line and fight their way in with terrorists all over inside civilian area. So that was much more complicated. If you would ask me, as someone who was dealing with those type of things before October 7, how much time it will take to the Israelis to save the life of the people in the kibbutzim and to finish the war, to clear all the south from the terrorists. We're talking about thousands of terrorists. The IDF doesn't know until this moment how many terrorists came, but we're talking about something between 4,000 and 6,000 terrorists, different waves, etc. These men came with heavy armament, from machine guns to RPG rockets, grenades, and IEDs, and whatever. And how much time it will take to clear the entire south? It's a big area. I would say a couple of months. That was probably the original plan of the Iranians, that it will take us some weeks, between weeks and months to clear that. And until then, they would do the second, the third stage of the war we will talk about later. But didn't happen because of this huge miracle of the CT, the counterterrorism. And when I'm saying counterterrorism, I mean it's a counterterrorism is actually a school. It's teaching this type of warfare in the IDF for many years. And all the units that was running and jumping to the fire in the first hours, from Yamam to the Commando Brigade, Maglana Goz Duvdevan, and also Lotar and Lotar Elat, and many, many units, of course, special units from the police, etc., were confronting those terrorists. And actually, it's a miracle because we had only about less than 10% casualties, and I'm talking about all the different type of both wounded and dead between the people themselves from those first responders. And they killed thousands of terrorists and stopped this bleeding. In 36 hours, they actually managed to clear the south. Of course, they were not alone. In the next episode, we will talk about the Israeli heroism and what happened there. But that's a whole other issue. Okay, so up until now, we were talking about the fact that the city units and the Second Secret Army actually managed to destroy the relative superiority that Hamas wanted to achieve in the first part of the war, in the first hours. But of course, they didn't do that all by themselves. They had a huge help. The second part of this miracle is the miracle of the Israeli heroism. You know, I believe that the Iranian planners of this war saw too many Marvel movies. In the Marvel movies, there is always this basic scene that you can see in the middle of, it always looks like Manhattan, I don't know, like a huge metropolitan, and in the middle there is this villain or a monster, it destroys everything, and you can see the crowd. And also there is like this special zoom in on those two police officers. In every movie it's like that, right? There's two black police officers eating their donuts or something, and then their mouth is opening and they're looking up to this huge whatever monster or problem, and they're saying, oh my God. And then you can see the crowd, and the crowd is doing what? It's very passive. Most of the crowd is just yelling, running all over and shouting, Superman, or I don't know, put your favorite hero in the gap, like Spider-Man, help us. That's it. So it's a very not Israeli thing to do. And I will give a short example. A couple of months ago, my baby girl, her name is Yair, came to me, and it was one of those days. She said, Father, do you want to play a game? I said, okay, what do you want to play? She said, I will be your princess and you'll be my prince. I said, okay, nice. So do you want me to save you? And she looked at me and she said, I can take care of myself, thank you. So that's a very Israeli thing. We are not waiting to be saved. I'm not familiar with a single Israeli, even a 4-year Israeli girl, that will wait and do nothing or shout, Superman, save me. That's something that you can't even imagine. Instead, they will try to do something. And that is not a very natural thing, even for us. I want to explain. There's a huge miracle that happened to us as the Jewish people without us even noticing that it did. My grandfather, he was a Holocaust survivor. And even though he came to Israel when he was 17, he volunteered immediately to the Haganah, then later to the IDF, and he was also an officer in the IDF, and he took part in the Independence War and in Six-Day War. He really didn't like guns. And when I was a kid, I came to him and I said, Saba, grandfather, can you please buy me a gun? And he said, no, I'm sorry. You go to the other Saba, to your other grandpa, and he will buy you a toy gun. I don't like guns. And so I did. But I'm telling this story from a reason. After I volunteered to the paratroopers brigade, and I was a soldier, a very young soldier. I didn't even have the red beret yet, but I was already a soldier with uniforms and weapon, etc. I came to visit him. I wanted him to be proud. And I went to his place. He looked at me and he was proud, and I saw some tears in his eyes. And then he asked me a question. He gave me a huge kiss here on the cheek, and he asked me this question. Yair, what did I just do? And I said, I don't know, you gave me a kiss. He said, yeah, but what's the Hebrew word for a kiss? And I said, neshika. He said, that's right. And what is this object that you're carrying with you? I said, this is my gun. He said, yeah, what's the Hebrew word for a gun? I said, it's a neshek. Right, but we are talking in the holy language, Ivrit. Hebrew is not a regular language. Every word has a special meaning. What's the connection between the words? Neshek, neshika. A kiss and a gun. I said, I don't know, Saba. You tell me. And so he did. He said, when we were young, we didn't have the opportunity, the chance to take care and to defend and to save our families, our communities, our people. And the Nazis did whatever they wanted. That was the exile. But we came here to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel, and now we have you. And you're an Israeli soldier. And you have this huge privilege and honor, but also holy duty to defend the one you love. So please give your weapon a big kiss. You need to do that because it's actually a tool that is holy. You need to defend the families, the communities, and the people of Israel with it. So that's actually symbolized for me a huge change, a huge miracle in the DNA of the Jewish nation. We are no longer in exile. And when those monsters came in October 7, inland, they thought they will find some lambs and sheep they can butcher. And they were so wrong. They met lions and lioness that actually confronted them in so many places, in so many different ways they didn't imagine. And the whole thing actually blocked them again and again. I have so many examples. I saw with my eyes when I was there all those crazy scenes. You could have seen on the ground a police officer or a guy from those emergency civilian squads of the kibbutzim, and his hand is open like that with a regular pistol, 9mm or something, and 25 meters from him, sometimes even closer, you could have seen some Hamas terrorists dead with their automatic weapons. I mean, it was asymmetrical. It was not fair, but they did their best. But I'm not talking only about the armed men. I'm talking also about women and even children, even kids. You know, you probably heard that story of this. He was only a youth, a young Israeli, maybe 16, 17. They captured him. They put a gun to his head, and they used the fact that he's Israeli. They said, open one of those shelters, one of those iron doors that kept guarded those families inside the houses. And they said, open, say in Hebrew the right words to tell them to get out. They wanted to capture the family inside. So this kid, you know, he's just a regular Israeli, like every other Israeli. I'm sure that before the war, nobody would even imagine such thing about him. He was probably one of those TikTok youngsters. He was looking at them and he said, go fuck yourself. And he shouted the last sentence in his life. He shouted something like, don't you guys open the door. They're all over. Wait to the IDF for coming. Now, you know, as a religious Jew, this story and other stories remind me of Talmudic legends, right? When we were kids, we were told that Jews used to behave that way. But in the Roman times or against the Greeks or whatever. But history is coming all over. And I saw all those scenes before this war. I asked myself, what will happen to this new generation of young Israelis? Would they manage to deal with a big war, with a big challenge? Because I knew this thing will come this way or another. And then I found myself driving with 20 years, maybe 25 years old soldiers from the city, from the unit, that I was volunteering to be part of, the Lotar, and they were with their cell phone again. We're driving down south with this armored car, Panther, that's the name of the car, and then you can see one of the guys is like going down, and everybody asked, what's going on? And he said, I just heard that a good friend of mine was kidnapped. And after a couple of minutes, someone from the other part of the vehicle is also doing like, I don't know, a yawn or something. Everybody asks, what's going on? And he says, I heard a good friend of mine was killed. And every couple of minutes, another rumor is getting inside, penetrating inside this armored car. And I ask myself, what will happen next? Because we're on our way to a mission. But then we're reaching our destiny, one of the kibbutzim, and the doors are opening, and these guys, you should have seen them. They're running outside like lions, really, holding their weapons and roaring and going and really happy about the fact that they are there, and they're eagering to save some Israelis and to killing the terrorists. And I said to myself, well, we don't understand this people, and we don't understand this generation, the generation of victory. And that's a huge miracle. The miracle and the miracles that we were talking about in this chapter were the miracle of heroism. Both the heroism of the army, the soldiers there on the front line from the first army. Of course, the third army will come later, but the second army, the secret army of the CT units, all of those units, Shaldag, by the way, and others. And the last part was the heroism of the people themselves, who were not, as the Iranian planners thought they will be. They were not butchered or slain like cattle. They were fighting to their last breath. So this is another X factor that the Iranian didn't, and the Hamas didn't thought about, and a huge miracle that actually happened to us in October 7. And I'm really looking forward to meet you all, guys, in the next chapter of our podcast, the amazing miracles that happened to Israel in the Iron Swords War.